Thanks.
Whoops. Oh my.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 22nd Planning Board Public Forum meeting regarding the presentation discussion of limited commercial district study, district goals and concept. This meeting is being recorded. First, I'd like to take a roll call of planning board members. Mr. Coons.
Present.
Ms. Delicio.
Ron, I don't see the record button on. But I am here.
It says it's recording. Ms. Foley.
Present.
Mr. Gilbert.
Present.
Mr. Olney.
I'm here.
Mr. Russell.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum present. Tonight we have a two-part meeting. First will be a public forum on the limited commercial district. The purpose of this public forum is to outline the goals of the Smart Growth Overlay District feasibility study in the LCD and present and discuss options for development. This meeting will go on from now until 8 p.m. I will close at 8 p.m. I'll close the forum. The second part of the meeting will be limited to planning board business from 8 to 8:30. I'd like to go over some ground rules. As a reminder, these discussions and recommendations by the board for bylaw changes are just that, recommendations. No bylaw changes are being taken place at this meeting. The documents that are being reviewed are available on the town's website. We will post the presentation, follow the meeting. There'll be several sections of the forum. The chair will indicate when questions will be taken. During the Q&A, we will take questions from the planning board and other boards and committees first, followed by others. The chair will indicate who will answer. Please respect the answers given. Rebuttals will not be allowed. If time allows, follow-up questions may be considered after others have had the opportunity to speak. After each section is summarized, time permitting, I will open each section up for questions and discussion. Please use the hand raise feature on Zoom and I will call on you in the order listed. I will attempt to get all hands raised attendees questions answered. If you're on the phone, please ask the chair to be recognized. Time permitting, we'll get into a second round of questions at the end. If your question has been previously discussed, there is no reason to repeat it. Thanks for participating tonight. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Sue Brown, our town planner, for an introduction.
Thanks, Ron. I just want to let you know that I'm going to provide a brief overview of the study and district goals, and then Gary Russell is going to go over a little bit of the timeline of how we got here. We're going to have a summary of draft design standards and regulations before we get to Mr. Simboli, who's going to present his ideas. And so I just want folks to know that we're going to kind of breeze through these first ones. A lot of it is a repeat. So bear with us, but we did want to just provide a brief overview for folks who hadn't been with us before. So this LCD study is being undertaken to determine if a 40R, a smart growth overlay district, in essence, a mixed use neighborhood that allows a certain amount of residential development by right and also allows for commercial development, is a viable strategy for the town to use to guide development in the limited commercial district. In particular, we're trying to answer some questions. What type and density of uses are desired here? What would the neighborhood look like and how would it function? And how much revenue might it produce to help the town fund the upkeep of its infrastructure? And our work, including consideration of your input, will help get us to these answers. So a smart growth overlay district is one of several options that the town can consider to guide growth in the district. We also have the choice to change the underlying zoning of the district or create an overlay district on our own without the requirement for by right housing. So as we complete the work of this study, we'll be better informed as to what the best choice may be. And that is just briefly about what our goals are, what we're looking to do. And I'm going to pass the talking stick over to Gary Russell for an overview of how we got here. And I see it looks like we're having trouble with the video, Ron.
What's going on?
Well, it says autosave, resume slideshow. So I think you need to resume the slideshow. Can you see it?
It says I'm sharing screen. Let me,
Well,
I thought we worked this out. Let me see what's going on.
maybe just close it down and bring it up again, perhaps. There you go. Just close it down and start it up. It'll probably come back on. So the screen, the first screen that came up that you should have seen while I was talking was just the screen that showed the master plan's goals. So if you
There we
can
go.
forward through to Ron, you're good now.
Okay, technology.
Can you forward through 2 slides or 1 slide? Yeah, so this one, so this just shows the goals that were laid out or the recommendations of the master plan to increase town revenue and support a diversity of housing options, which just speaks to why we were looking at the 40R study. You can go to the next slide. And I'm passing the talking stick, as I mentioned, to Mr. Russell.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sue, Ron. Since the slide is up, I'll be brief. Is the timeline is in front of you, but just a reminder that as with most of our planning processes, this has been a while in the making. It goes all the way back to coming out of the master plan recommendations. And then we also had internal meetings with boards, committees. We had a meeting with Department of Housing and Community Development. Back in 2019, we had the DHCT, Department of Housing and Community Development, come out and help us with a public forum. Many of you that I see on the list of attendees were at that meeting. And then we also talked about this several times as a planning board and voted to move forward with this 40R study. And so here we are today, and this is our 3rd public forum specific to the 40R. And as Sue mentioned, it's not the only option we have for this area, but the work that we're doing here, I think, can serve us very well in talking about a lot of things that are applicable, even if we choose a different route to accomplish these goals. Just as a reminder for anyone who is unfamiliar, the limited commercial district is all of the parcels property north of 128. The 40R study area that we're looking at is the developable parcels that are to the east and the west of Upper School Street. So it's the area where the MAC already is, and then across the street, the Doggy Depot, and of course, the infamous site of the proposed 40B at Shingle Hill. It's worth noting that this is a rather large area, the LCD. It's 760 acres in total, but it's important to point out that over 400 acres is already permanently protected. And there are other sort of integrated protections by virtue of the wetlands, because the wetlands always have their own protections through regulations. And so what we're looking at through the 40R is the parcels on the east side, which is already previously disturbed territory with some warehouses, old quarry activity, the MAC Medical Center, compost site. And then there, of course, is the Shingle Hill parcel that I mentioned, and we have the Doggy Depot, which exists. And so that's the area of focus. Tonight, we're going to be looking specifically at commercial opportunities. All along the 40R is a process that includes mixed use, commercial, and housing. The previous forum we had, we focused a lot on housing simply because there were a lot of questions about housing. And of course, there are some complexities regarding how much housing do we need or can we support, given that the 40B is under review at this time. So here we are tonight, third forum, and we want to specifically talk about commercial development. And we'll have some landowners with us tonight that I think is a really good source for us to listen to what their ideas and thoughts are. And we're going to have some questions and answers later. So I'm going to throw this back to Sue.
Thanks, Gary. So I'm just briefly going to remind people of what the draft design standards are and the regulations are that as they're currently drafted, and these are things that can change as we get to the end of this process. But I'll just briefly go over and remind people that this is an overlay zone and that a developer can apply for a permit to develop under the existing zoning, even once the overlay is in place. And this overlay zone can also have sub-districts if we so choose. One thing to remember is that 51% of the development in a 40R, a smart growth, is residential by right with site plan approval. So right now that is what we've capped it at 255 units. So if the approved 40B, if the 40B is approved, that would leave the possibility of another 100 or so by right in this district. You can allow more by special permit, but it is not by right. The decision that we need to make is this too much, or is it appropriate considered that the anticipated assisted living units will require housing or would benefit with independent housing. So, and you'll see that as we move forward tonight. Another thing to remember is that 20% of the housing must be affordable. If it's age restricted, up to 25% must be affordable. The regulations cannot require age restricted development, but a developer may propose it. And in that case, it's allowed. The draft regulations as currently written have a 38 foot height. We could choose to have an exception for a motel or other uses if that's desirable. It also requires 25% be open space, which can be a combination of buffers and more usable or public open space. And 10% of each development itself must have at least 10% usable open space, so a public park or the like. There are parking limitations. The only one that I'll mention is that currently it's 1.5 per residential unit. There's also limits depending on other uses, generally according to square foot. The regulations also do identify the plan approval process, which, as I mentioned, although residential or we can choose to have commercial by right, we also do have a plan approval process, which allows us to have peer reviews, do the same kinds of study that are being undertaken by the 40B and other large projects. And it allows you to say, or to not approve it if if undue impacts cannot be mitigated. And peer funding is by the developer. So that's generally, oops. Yep. So that's generally what is in the regulations. Next slide, Ron. Just briefly, very briefly go over the design standards, which were presented at the last forum. Just to say that the design standards are required that they be adhered to, and they're there to ensure that new development is of a high quality, helps form a cohesive neighborhood, and that it's, these are broken out in the document as a sense of place, integration with nature or sustainability, connectivity, talking about how people get around, and buildings. And this document is online. It is has both text and graphs, or not graphs, but pictures to kind of show what we're thinking here. I am going to stop there. Ron, if you want to open it up for any questions, that's fine, or we could move on and have more time for Anthony's presentation.
Yeah, I've lost the ability to see anyone hand up because all these.
Maybe I can help.
I see.
Yep, there's a few. Mary Foley,
Yeah, okay,
Sandy.
Mary Foley, do you have a question?
Hi, Ron. Thanks. Yeah, this is Mary Foley. Some of these are new regulations that the planning board has not seen, this max 255 units and that type of thing. So just a couple questions around that. If that becomes a proposed bylaw, 255 max units, that would by its nature then limit the amount of commercial development that could occur, correct?
Ron, you want me to answer that?
Yes, Sue, can you answer that question? Thank you.
So Mary, it's kind of a back and forth. It would not limit the commercial that's allowed to be developed. In fact, what we're trying to do is to, because the development, because of what is permitted, has to, and by permitted, I don't mean get a building permit for, but what we have to allow by the regulations is that 51% is housing. But we can get to that 51% by saying, here's how much commercial we want, and then backing into that other housing number. So it doesn't limit the amount of commercial.
Well, I think it would have to limit it by its nature if you're defining just a certain amount of commercial development to get to that 51%.
So I understand. Okay, I understand what you're saying. So the land itself is not 50% commercial, 50% residential. There's different ways that you could have a smaller footprint, et cetera. So what I'm indicating is that if we want more commercial, you would then need to allow more housing. So
Okay, that's my basic question. So
good.
My concern with this new proposal is that we're limiting the commercial development that is going to bring in the revenue. And so I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble here with hands raised.
I see Christine Delicio.
Okay, Christina.
Hi, thanks. I just had a question. When you were referring to regulations, are you referring to Mass General Law or proposed regulations that we are thinking about? I'm a little confused when you say regulations.
Yep, thanks. No, the regulations that would be in the Smart Growth Overlay District regulations themselves. So there are both design standards and there are actual regulations, the zoning regulations themselves.
So we haven't seen those yet, correct?
I think that I shared a draft of them that was the state's, I would say, template.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me, Sue, this is Gary. If I may also interject just quickly, just to be clear, the cap of 255 units is not new information. We talked about that in our last public forum, just so that folks are clear that nothing has happened, that we're springing something new on anyone. I mean, certainly we can talk about it more, but it was presented before.
Thank you, Gary. I see one more hand raised. Sandy, could you identify yourself?
Hi, thanks. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. This sort of follows a little bit on with Christina's question. I was a little confused about what regulations they were. So I was assuming that those were regulations if we create a 40R based on state rules. And the 350,000 and the 3,000 per building, is that the net that we would get out of declaring a 40R? So I didn't see, and I think I've heard at other meetings, there are different things that we could do. We could just do development ourselves in the LCD area and not get a 40R. So the net benefit would be $350,000 by declaring a 40R, and then we would have to then abide by these standards.
Not quite, but Ron, you want to go back to that other? Just go back
Yes,
one
I'm
slide.
having a, yes, you're really challenging me.
Yes.
Let me see if I can go
Thanks,
backwards.
Sandy. So, no, backwards, backwards. We're done. So Sandy, I think the graphic that was up is, what you saw is that when a town approves a 40R overlay district, it gets an incentive payment from the state. So those incentive payments, they come in two pots, if you will. One, once the overlay district is adopted, the town gets an incentive payment from the state based on how many housing units are allowed by permitting. So in this case, if there were 255 units, we would get the $350,000 incentive payment from the state. The next set of monies, and that's a one-time payment, of course, and then the next set of monies, once the permitting or the regulations are in place, anytime a building permit is given for something to actually be built, there's a $3,000 per permit that is paid by the state. So say a developer came in and they wanted to make 50 units of housing, we would get 150,000 via the building permits. And that payment is just made when they came in. So these are just incentive payments, but they are not, that's not tax revenue. The real incentive for developing in the LCD is tax revenue.
And that we don't need a 40R for.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And so I think it would be helpful in the future that you sort of show the calculation. So if there's less residential units, then the initial incentive payment would go down. And then if you built beyond that, then you would get the 3,000 plus. Just to make it clearer, I think would be helpful. That's all.
So you do not get the 3,000 more, you only get it up to the number permitted, but.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
Certainly.
Is my screen being shared? I'm kind of.
It is, Ron. Yep.
Okay, so let's move on. No more questions. Let's move on. Sue, do you want to continue?
Yes, so we are, let me just say that we can move on to Mr. Simboli. So I'm gonna have you switch out of this
You're challenging me, Sue. I will
presentation
switch to the
for
other
tonight.
one. Yes.
You're doing great. And I'll introduce Anthony in case there's folks on that don't know him. Anthony Simboli is the owner of the MAC, and the properties abuts it about 40 acres, I think, in addition to his, and he can correct me if I have the numbers wrong. And he's going to just go through his ideas of what he might want to develop on his land if there were, if we can create zoning that will allow it. And I just want to remind people that Joel, met with us in the past with the planning board and the board of selectmen. So this is not his first time before us, but he's advanced his plans, and I'm gonna let him go at that.
Good evening.
Is is the screen share on?
Yes, can you just enlarge it to the full screen? That would be great.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So good evening, everyone who doesn't know me. My name is Anthony Simboli. And tonight I'd like to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what I'd like to develop on the land adjacent to the Manchester Athletic Club and including the Manchester Athletic Club. I think tonight I'd like to stress about what the potential is for the land and what to build. More importantly, talk about the opportunities for the town and the benefits to the town. I do understand that there's a lot of concerns about infrastructure, the environment, traffic, but those issues center more around how to build it. So I would like to, when the concept becomes more developed or advanced, we could kind of address those concerns. Right now, a little bit of background about myself. I was born in Winchester and I spent my summers at Good Harbor Beach. I attended Belmont Hill School, and I was fortunate enough to graduate from Princeton University and MIT. At MIT, I received my master's in real estate development from the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. After graduation, I worked for a local bank in real estate lending, and in about 1998, I joined a family real estate firm. I spent over 30 years developing parcels of land in a small town in Chelsea, right outside of Boston. We were in about 15 to 17 other cities and towns, but predominantly most of the development was in Chelsea. And it was a town of 1.8 square miles with a population 6 to 7 times of Manchester. And so it educated me on balancing the needs of the community with the needs for a successful development. Over the years, I participated in about 15 different development projects. And I was on a number of town boards, some including renovations of existing schools and the development of new construction for new schools. So if you could transition to the next slide, I'd like to give you a little more in-depth background of how I got here. During the last several years, I refined my concept using the master plan as a guide. On February 3rd, about a year ago, I made a presentation to the planning board and the board of selectmen. At that time, I asked for feedback concerning what to build and how to move forward. Just to give you a little background about the MAC. The MAC is currently a struggling local club with an exceptional youth tennis program. 2 weekends ago, we had 24 kids in national tournaments in multiple states. It's really kind of a hidden treasure here in many ways. We don't really advertise ourselves well. I don't know of any other clubs that had 1 or 2 kids in national tournaments. As far as the club itself, all the parcels together, the club is situated in approximately 50 acres on several parcels. A majority of the excess land that is not used by the club is an old quarry. It's unsightly and it's dangerous. I'm bordered on one side by a self-storage facility and on the other side by a highway, Route 128. In many ways, the development of the site would improve it. But most of all, this development would provide for the seniors of Manchester, add community amenities, enhance the our senior civic responsibility, and significantly increase the tax base. My goal is to collaborate and partner with the town to build something that works for everyone. If you could transition to the next slide. What I'm proposing is a senior community that's integrated with a youthful and a younger community with support services. The intent of which is to encourage seniors to live independently longer. I would hope to have concierge medicine. I would also hope to have a medical staff or an administrative staff that could help coordinate doctor's appointments, make sure that different doctors, so if you have your heart doctor and your kidney doctor, you can make sure that they're getting this list of medications from each doctor. But as recently having to spend a lot of time dealing with my dad, it was an inordinate amount of time coordinating hospital visits, making sure the doctors had this, had all different doctors had all the records. And so my attempt here would be an integrated community to have the seniors surrounded by youth, number one, and have administrative services for them. And as they aged, they could move through different levels of care that's needed. The staff at the club could change the light bulbs, help with delivering groceries, but it would be a full service community. So I want to create a better quality of life for our seniors using the MAC as a focal point. And, you know, one thing I'd note is that Manchester has a disproportionate number of seniors as compared to other towns and populations. And I think the thing that stuck out to me was when we first opened up after we were closed for 4 months, the first person back was a 93-year-old on the gym floor who said that if he sat any longer at home, he wouldn't move again. And so that's kind of what's driving me towards this development. As far as the development itself, I think the next slide will give you the uses that I'm proposing. I want to expand and renovate and continue renovating the existing club, including adding at least 6 to 8 outdoor tennis courts. I have proposed 62 age-restricted homes, so independent homes on the site where people could live independently before they needed to move to the assisted living, which would have assisted living and memory care. I then have 2 apartment buildings that total about 94 units that could be workforce housing, market rental units, or they could also be age-restricted buildings that would give the seniors a different option. So if they didn't want to go to a small townhome before the assisted living, they could be in an apartment building complex. I have medical office building and some service-oriented retail buildings, which would be 2 stories. On the first floor would be the offices and the retail, and on the second floor would be apartments. I also have a senior center and a daycare center on the site. And I have a hotel and a day spa. One is an expansion of the spa that's at the club already. And the hotel I would hope to have mixed so that part of it would be extended stay and part of it would be regular hotel rooms. When we have a tournament in the summertime, families have to stay in Wakefield and Reading because there's no hotel rooms in the area. And then I thought the hotel would also work well for those traveling from afar to visit their loved ones in the assisted living. As far as the assisted living, I'm looking at about 280 units inside the building. And if you could transition to the next slide, I'll walk through the site plan. So as you can see on the bottom left-hand side of the screen is the existing Manchester Athletic Club. Next to it, closest to the highway, would be the hotel and the spa. Next to that are 2 blue buildings, which are apartment buildings with parking underneath. Next to that is a playground. The pink buildings across from the hotel are medical offices and apartments on the second floor. Just to the right in purple is daycare and a senior center, actually side by side. Behind the pink buildings is a youth soccer field. and tennis courts. And then you can see a second youth soccer field and the independent units that surround the assisted living facility. And the units, the assisted living that faces the woods, you see kind of a jagged between yellow and green. And that's because the first floors would all have terraces, outdoor terraces. And this is kind of a quick overview of how I would look at a maximum development on the site. And I think there's a lot of benefits to the town. If you could switch to the next slide. I feel that a project of this nature would improve the last major piece of developable land in the town. It would transform an old quarry into a vibrant community to serve its seniors. It will ensure the continued success of the Manchester Athletic Club, and it would set an example in the Northeast for senior living and care. The fields will help, and it will significantly contribute to the tax base of the town. So I think in sum, the project is centered around the town and its needs for both civic needs for the seniors and its fiscal needs. And that is a quick overview. I'm glad to discuss or answer any questions of specific detail. And Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it to you.
Yes, I'm having trouble seeing hands raised. Sue, can you help me on that?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Anthony, thank you so much for that overview and for sharing the site plan and your plans and your reasons for it. So as Ron said, we'll be taking planning board and other board and committees first. So Christine Delicio's hand is up.
Yeah. Christina.
Sorry, that was up from before. I do have some questions, but not quite yet.
Okay.
I'll take it down. Sorry.
All right, I see Sheila Hill. Ms. Hill?
Ron, did you want to take board comments first?
I don't see any board hands up. Any board members have any comments or questions?
Gary
Okay.
Gilbert's hand is up. Mary Foley's
Gary
hand is up.
Gilbert. Okay, sorry.
Thanks very much for this new and improved site plan. I'd like to see a hard copy sometime.
Sure.
And thanks for your efforts. I'm curious, first off, the fields, would they be public access fields, or these, since they're on private land, how would that be run? And would you be using the same kind of lighting controls and use regulations that we have for town fields?
I'd be happy to. I think the intent with the fields would be open for town use. I think that I'd love to use at least one of the fields for some extended activities at the Manchester Athletic Club, but I'd be open for discussion on the best way to benefit the town. As far as the lighting, I'd leave that to the guidance from the town and the engineers on the project. I mean, this is a concept phase of massing and uses. So I think that, I would look to the town for the lead on what their expectations are. I think the benefits to this site, in a sense, is that, my two neighbors are a self-storage facility and 128. So I think from a lighting, disturbing the neighbors, I think that part is minimized. As far as lighting, and if it would disturb the wildlife and nature, I think I'd have to do further research on that piece of it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, part of the reason we have the regulations we have is because you're creating housing here. So these would be fields adjacent to housing. So it would have a
Yes.
similar issues that we have in our other parks, but I won't belabor that point. I had two other brief points.
Sure.
One, I'd like to see personally a denser land use that leaves more open space by default. I mean, I know it's a slightly more urban approach to the development, but the housing typology you've got there is kind of spread out, and I'm just wondering if you would consider different building types and to some extent, I guess the words densify it, for the sake of leaving more open space. And the other comment was about, you mentioned a public or parks. Would you,
Yep.
would you consider perhaps, you're adjacent already, some very valuable and important parkland. The Manchester, the Conservation Trust operates. Would you
Mhm.
be, instead of building new parkland, might you do some ameliorations, better linkage, maybe spend money on trail maintenance or that type of thing in working cooperatively with them?
Yes, and as far as density, it's kind of a little flippant, but I had 102 units and then I moved to the apartments to open up land for fields, but I do understand what you're looking for and I can certainly research a plan that would promote like a sense of community for the seniors, but be more dense and leave more open land. I'd be willing to look into that.
I don't want anybody to leave this meeting thinking I mean more units. I'm trying to say just
Yes,
less of a
more
footprint.
compact. Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Foley.
Oh, hi, thank you. Yeah, great presentation, thank you. And I was frantically trying to write notes, so I have a lot of questions, but I'm just gonna ask one.
Sure.
I just wanted to try to get a number. So I think you said 62 age-restricted homes, 94 units of apartment building,
Yes.
and then 280 assisted living. So that's 436 total units, is that correct?
Yes, and then over the medical apartments in the office, where it says medical and apartments and office and apartments, there's approximately 20 to 30 units there. I mean, this is a very approximate count, you know, but it's for purposes of the units. That's roughly the count that I'm.
So roughly about.
Well,
four-
because on the issue is like in the assisted living facility, the number of units could vary based on the size of the units and the type of care. So the individual units that you see on the plan, there are 61 of them. As constituted on this schematic.
For the separate age restricted.
For these, yes, correct.
Okay, great. And then do you have any idea the size of the hotel?
The capacity, the hotel that's shown here is 240 rooms. I think that I would scale it back about one floor and it would be about 146 is roughly. My idea with the hotel is to have a portion of a third to half the units would be extended stay units, so that if someone was coming for a week to stay with their parents, or if at the club we had like a camp or a for like adults for, you know, like a tennis camp to work on certain skills that people could come for 3 or 4 days at a time and they might enjoy an extended stay unit versus a hotel room. And I think that the hotel, it would help the club. I think it would help the assisted living, but more importantly, from the town's perspective, a hotel is the largest generator, I think, per square foot for taxes. At least it was in Chelsea when it, as far as, you know, the taxes generated per footprint. So I think it's so that's my roughly. I mean, this is just a concept to get some feedback on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Christina, is that a refreshed hand or?
Yeah. Yes, it is a
okay.
refreshed hand. I have a few questions. So bear with me. So do you own the land that the access road is on? Is it Atwater? Is that a public road or is that a private road that you own?
That is a public road, I believe, or most of it. When you get closer to the club, it transitions, but I don't know the exact point.
Okay, great. And then you mentioned your neighbors. Have you had any feedback from the Brady property regarding this project or proposal?
Yes, I've talked with Tim. I don't want to speak for him. But I think that he feels that improvements to the quarry and development there would be beneficial to him.
Okay, have you looked at a way to access 128 from a different point?
I've roughly looked at an access road in the rear for emergency entrances or exits, but not, I think that I don't feel that, the assisted living and the age restricted units, the traffic that they demand is from the workers, it's higher, but from the actual occupants, I would leave that to a traffic study in the future.
Okay, great. How about water and sewer? Does this project demand public access to water and sewer, or could you?
So I have water on site.
Okay, how about sewer?
Sewer, I do not.
So would public sewer do you need public sewer is my question.
I do.
Okay. And then my final question is, what is the benefit to you of this 40R versus just changing the underlining zoning?
I think I don't know. I think that the 40R in some ways is more restrictive as far as I think if I have age restricted units, a higher number has to be affordable. I think that I would leave that to the town to look at what's, their best choice or avenue to approach the project.
So this isn't something that you are really pushing for. You could just do this project with us changing the underlined zoning versus the 40.
I'd be happy to work with the town in either capacity.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a hand up from Ms. Hill.
Ron, Dana Menon is on a board. She's on the
sorry.
sustainability committee. No, that's all right. You probably
I'm
wouldn't know.
sorry.
That's okay.
I'll go to Dana Menon. I see your hand up. Sorry.
No worries. It's no problem. Thank you. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you for presenting this plan and opening yourself up to all this input and hopefully constructive criticism. And I just want to say thank you for this process. I am on the sustainability committee, and I've been following along on bits and pieces of this 40R process. And I listened to your description of what you were hoping that this assisted living community would be, and the expanded uses and facilities for those residents and for the other residents of Manchester and the users of your club. And looking at your plan, I was surprised to see the assisted living facility kind of isolated off to the end. I had expected from your description to see it more kind of integrated into some of the other fabrics and some of the other pieces. And similar to what Gary Gilbert was saying, I think creating that kind of denser neighborhood feeling would be beneficial, both for visitors to the site and for as being an attractive, place for other people to come and visit, and for the people living in the assisted living facility. You were talking about integrating them with this younger community. And I think that doing that site planning, really kind of physically getting those uses proximate to each other would be a big benefit in that way. Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is I'd be happy to walk people through the site and can explain my choices and why. And I think that the integration part of it would come through a lot of programming also. So that, for instance, if you're at Brooksby Village, I shouldn't really, but when you go downstairs, you can get your hair cut and you can go to a restaurant. I would like to have services so that these people are drawn to the club for their physical therapy, that they're drawn to the restaurant at the hotel, that yes, there'd be services in the assisted living facility, but it wouldn't be a one-off, where a lot of times you'll see an assisted living building that is all by itself right off the highway, and it's kind of on an island. And so here, what I'm hoping is that the seniors that live independently could go out and watch a Little League baseball game, that it's really through the programming and services of the site. As far as where the assisted living facility is, it's the views and the vistas from looking in that direction. It's the best part of the site for it from a ambiance feel, but I do understand your point, and I'm glad to look at, other options.
As much as like even just like injecting, like a, some slice of that retail building into an area with some of the housing, kind of mixing it up a little bit. So, and then you would get more crossover. I don't think it would be people wouldn't say, oh, we're going to the restaurant in the assisted living facility. It would be kind of in that neighborhood, if that's
Point well taken.
what I'm trying to convey. The other thought was, I think that with your uses, there's going to be a large parking demand just in general, but I wonder if there are some ways to cut down on some of the surface parking. Like the youth soccer field would probably have different hours of use than the medical offices would, so they could share a lot of parking spaces. From a
Where do you see parking?
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if there's a way to cut down on some of the surface paving in some of those uses. And then I don't know, I'm not able to get a great sense of the topography on there, but if there's any chance for solar or other kind of energy uses, resources, that would be pretty awesome. We haven't been able to succeed at that anywhere else in town. So I don't know if that's something that you would be willing to look into.
Yes, I think that I think getting people to the site to walk it with me can lead. I think that the site does have some challenges in how you approach the development on it, but I'd be willing to look at all of those. I think that, part of the problem in the planning process is it 250 assisted living units, or hey, if we're going to build this, why not go to 400? The town has 5,800 people, just 10% of it. If 10% of the town needed assisted living or senior housing, that's 580 units. So I think that as I get a sense of the scale and the density that the town is looking for, I think it will kind of create a remake of the design. But they're all good points that I'm glad to look into.
Yeah, well, thanks again so much for sharing your vision with us at this point and opening yourself up to these discussions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We want to move on. We're running pretty short on time. Sheila Hill has her hand up. Ben's had it up,
Thank you.
Sheila.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Samboli, I am astounded at the scale of your project. I joined the MAC in 1977 to play tennis and was happy to see you joined, or the previous owner joined, by Bolletary, and certainly profited from the presence of Bolletary and his programs. I had thought when I first heard about your interest in this expanded property that it focused on making this somewhat a destination resort for tennis players. You talked about a skating rink, certainly more tennis courts, a hotel, a pool, I thought. And right now, I happen to be very surprised at the transformation in your plan, which seems now much more directed towards assisted living, continuous care communities, etc., apartments, all that is a surprise to me. So I just have three quick questions. I wanted to ask, what do you see as the development costs for the build out of this project? Let's
Well-
just say it goes just as you have it here without any changes. What would be the development cost for that?
Well, let me put a couple of things in perspective first. First, I think that the previous owner and I, very late, the property originally had 70 acres and 30 of it were donated by the previous owner right before the purchase of the club. That we worked together to do a subdivision plan. And I think that the previous owner has
Now,
preserved a lot of space for the town.
Mr.
The
Donovan,
second thing is that the town has to look at the balances between, this is the last piece of land, that major piece of land that can be developed in the town, and they have to balance what their the tax revenues that can be generated and the benefits that it can serve for the town. So I think that once we speak to density, I can take the development guidance in that way. As far as the club, there's been a lot of improvements made at the club, and there's been a lot of necessary repairs to the club that most people don't see from a structural and mechanical nature. And I've recently signed a new contract for the outdoor pool and to add a kiddie pool. And so, yes, it's a dense project. And it can get even denser with more open space by having denser buildings. But I think it's really for the town to look at what is to the best benefit to them. As far as the club itself, we're trying to find out in this new world, what's the best way to survive. The MAC I've always looked at as potentially being a mini IMG, but it needs the hotel for such. So as far as the existing scale of the project, I would say that it would be, well exceed 200 million as currently constituted. But this is just a concept in the making.
yeah, so I appreciate that. I mean, this is a conceptual discussion. And what would be the timeline for that build out? Assuming you would start at the hotel end.
It all depends. I think that the way that this plan was created, if you saw the other iterations, is that I wanted to develop it so that I could do it in phases. So for instance, right now, a hotel, under the current, in a year maybe, but currently right now, you couldn't get financing for a hotel with the pandemic.
Right.
The assisted living is long overdue in this area. There seems to be a tremendous need for it. So the independent housing and the assisted living would probably be, for me, where I would start. And I would think that the project could go as fast or as slow. For me, I think you could do it over a 3, 5, 7 year time period. That it could be done in stages so that the town can digest the additional, or there's other factors. Right now, I don't think there'd be ever a better time for financing and investment. So, in 3 or 4 years, that money may dry up. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And I think that I have to look to the town to give me some guidance. I'm perfectly willing to do this over a 5 to 7 year period, or to do it over a 3 year period. I think I need input for what's in the best interest of the town. I'm willing to work with everyone so that we accomplish the objectives. But I also think that as soon to be a resident of the town, my concern is that this is one of the last pieces of land that the town can look to generate tax revenue, and they have to seriously consider what's in the short and long-term best interest of the town. And that's really, and I'm willing to listen to all sides of the discussion.
I'm sure that's appreciated by the town. Just last question quickly, with the assisted living facilities and the independent units, do you see those as restricted to residents of Manchester?
I've briefly had this discussion, and I think I need to do a little bit more homework about what I can legally do. But I would certainly love to give the first preference to a majority of the local residents. I just don't know what the fair and the right thing to do is. And I think that, but if there was a way to at least set aside a number of units or have a preference or some weighted average that could work for Manchester, but I think there's a demand there just for Manchester. So I'm perfectly willing to follow the town's lead on this one. I don't know what the fair thing to do with the surrounding communities like Essex. So I think that there should at least be a larger discussion about how it should be approached.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I have two more questions and we need to move on. Connie, could you identify yourself? Hello. Might be muted.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, my question is to Mr.
Connie, can you identify yourself? Just for
Oh,
the
sorry,
record?
Connie Sullivan, Hickory Hill. My question is it Mr. Stromboli, who's the owner of
Yes.
the back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Stromboli, I am coming at
Stromboli.
this as the founding director of the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association. My question to you is, who told you that Manchester desperately needs assisted living? Have you done a feasibility study? What is your what is your
I think-
experience in senior housing? And no, assisted living cannot discriminate by location. So can you tell me what your experience is in senior housing?
So I would be glad to have this discussion with a full resume in more detail at another time. I think that I don't think I believe that they desperately needed assisted living. I think that I said that there was a disproportionate aged population in Manchester compared to surrounding towns. But
And how many units are you proposing?
this is a concept plan. I think that the building as constituted could hold as many as 250 to 300 units.
Okay. I just want to go on record because I know there's a lot of people listening that this is just, I mean, I don't even know how to say it. I mean, 250 to 300 units, maybe Boston. I mean, this is like pie in the sky. And I guess I just don't understand who you're speaking to, where your experience comes in assisted living or senior housing, and you're proposing half of the new development being senior housing. And I find it disturbing that the town is even entertaining something that is so
Ron,
ill-conceived.
I think you
Yes.
had a rule about rebuttals.
Yeah.
It's a little over the top.
Yes. Yes, Connie, we'd like to move on. Your
That's
point was
fine.
taken. Thank you,
That's fine.
Connie. And the last question on this segment, Axel, would you identify yourself, please?
Hi, it's actually not Axel, but Axel's wife, Sylvia. And
Oh, Sylvia.
as part of the baby boomer generation, I actually applaud this idea of, this is a comment, not a question. I applaud the idea of integration of this as opposed to separate assisted living and elderly housing. And I just wanted to remind people of a quote by Margaret Mead, who some of you may know is a famous anthropologist. And her hypothesis was that the best societal learning has always occurred when 3 generations come together in context, the child, the elder, and the middle adult. And I really like the integration with the community, with the MAC, the youth soccer, and the other sports. And until COVID, I have always marveled about how the MAC was actually in many ways Manchester's center of community. And so I see that this proposal is continuing that, and hopefully someday we're past COVID and we can pick that up again. So I want to congratulate the plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much. I think we've answered all the questions. Ron, maybe you can end that slideshow, bring the others back up. It didn't, you started it, it didn't take, we've got there. So maybe you can bring that back up again. And while you're doing that, I will just let folks know, thank you for the questions and for the good direction that you've given Anthony as he opens himself up, as Dana said. And then I just want to introduce Joel Taylor, who is the owner of the private dog park on the other side of the street. Joel's just going to briefly kind of talk about an idea that he has for his parcel in the event that we were able to change zoning to support commercial use. So if you're still here with us, Joel.
I am. Hi there, my name is Joel Taylor. I own the Doggy Depot. And although I have nothing to present, I just want to share my ideas. We currently have a private dog park across the street on School Street. And we would love the opportunity to develop the property to include other services like daycare, boarding, and potentially retail, dog food and retail items. We currently, we have a location in Beverly Farms where we do a lot of those things. And I own this property here in Manchester, and I'm potentially interested in transitioning to Manchester. I love the town. We're considering moving to Manchester. And yeah, we're just excited about the potential development, and we're happy to be in town.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joel. I don't know if you want to answer any questions that anyone might have, if we have time, Ron.
Any questions on the Doggy Depot? I see 2 hands, but I think they just need to be taken down. Okay, thank you. Sue, is my screen being shared? Is this?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
So did you want to move on to the next topic?
Sure. I'll just say, Joel, thank you so much for, again, sharing your thoughts and ideas. And I'm sure there will be questions in the future if there aren't tonight.
Sure. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks so
Sorry,
much.
this is Sandy. I did have a question.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, sorry.
I know you may have thought it was from before. That's okay. Sandy Rogers
Okay.
again.
Okay.
I guess I have a question because this is adjacent to Shingle Hill. Is this Shingle Place Hill? Is this location that you own dealing with some of the same topology issues and adjacency to conservation land that would have to be vetted?
I believe I but the Brown family. I don't think we're specifically abutting the conservation land, but I can't speak to that.
That's true, Joe.
Hmm.
The Brown property is your abutters.
Yeah.
And some.
Okay, so I would think that any idea of opening up the commercial and extra development on this other side would have to go through the same scrutiny and due diligence.
I would imagine, yeah.
And that you haven't looked into?
No, I mean, this is obviously just in the very preliminary stages. We're just expressing an interest. If things stay the way they are for us and we operate as a dog park, we'd be perfectly happy. But we would love to, if the opportunity presents itself, we'd love to develop the property and something that would fit the needs of the community. But obviously, we'll see where this goes.
Okay, so that really depends on, you know, the town could determine whatever boundaries there are, overlay, if they change the zoning. So just trying to understand that, Sue. Thank you.
Okay. Sue, do we want to move on now?
I think that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks again, Joel.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a
and
quick
people-
question about that. Is there any possibility that you would entertain an idea of a public dog park up there?
I'm certainly open to all suggestions and anything that makes sense for both my company and for the community. I don't know that it lends itself to that in its current state. It certainly doesn't lend itself to that. We just don't have the available parking. The only vehicles that come up there during the day are company vans transporting our dogs.
Okay.
But I'm certainly open to all suggestions and whatever makes sense for both me and the community.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Joel.
Sure
Thanks,
thing.
Joe.
Ron, can you flip to the next one? So this we're taking a very high level look at this, and I just wanted to, because some questions have been asked about, you know, what are we doing here and why are we doing it? So I just want to provide some just very high level figures here. So right now we are spending around $3 million a year on capital improvements. So maintaining and improving our infrastructure and facilities. The projected need is about $5 million a year. So this would be what we're doing now plus new bonded debt. So clearly there's a need to create more revenue here. And just a very preliminary estimate based on the MAC redevelopment indicates that, you know, 1.5 million plus revenue per year could be expected from this. And this is just, I want to say, and Ginny is on the line, our town assessor. This is based on the value and assessment, but not based on income expense, which businesses, commercial businesses in the end would be based on income and expense. But I just wanted to kind of put these numbers out there because folks have been asking. And I'm happy to take a few questions. We're not really able to get into the weeds a whole lot, but I want to wrap it up in time we've got about 20 minutes. So Ron, I will let you determine.
Yeah, I don't see any new questions with hands raised. Anybody have a question on the phone or? Okay, we can move on to the next slide if there's no questions. Sue, do you want
Great.
to finish?
Actually, I think Gary was going to jump in here and talk about the other option that we have is to change our underlying zoning to support commercial development.
Right. Thanks, Sue. So we do have the option to do this work ourselves. And there are two options really about how we could do that. One is we simply rezone, change the zoning for all of the LCD. So essentially, you know, rebuild from scratch. That would be more of an aggressive process than what we're doing with the recodification of our bylaws right now, which we're really tweaking and cleaning up. I know there are some major changes, but it's not really a start from the ground up sort of deal. We could also create an overlay district in the LCD that is simply our own overlay district that the community decides. And that could be similar to the 40R in terms of we can define sub-districts, we can define our uses, we can define buffer zones however we wish. The difference would be that we would not be tied to any state regulations. We wouldn't be tied to any formulas for housing versus commercial. And then of course we wouldn't get any of the incentive payments either, but we would have total control of what the town wanted to see in the LCD. So one of the challenges, there are a few challenges in the LCD that zoning could address. And as most of you know, the topography is challenging. We have, as it is pretty much everywhere in Manchester, it's either generally either rock or wetlands, which makes it difficult to develop it. And in order to undergo development in this area, I think as you've heard from a couple of landowners is before folks can embark on creating a development plan and really getting to the point that we know whether it will work or not is folks, property owners and developers need to have some predictability or some understanding about what will be acceptable. What can we do? And so one of the biggest reasons that development hasn't happened, I believe, is there are height restrictions in the LCD that make it very difficult to create the type of buildings that are profitable and functional, because really the more height you allow, then you get a greater density on a smaller footprint, which is of course much more cost effective, and it can also be very much more sustainable. We've heard about that in several conversations regarding let's push things closer together so we can save more open space. And so simply changing the allowable height requirement in the zoning of the LCD would be a great benefit to incentivize development in the area. We have talked about, and by we, I mean the community, we've talked about this through the master plan process, and again through the 40R process, that light manufacturing is a possibility, as well as research and development. These types of uses are in demand regionally and looking for homes, but particularly research and development facilities require a much higher building, because within each floor of your building, there's a lot of mechanical equipment that has to be tucked into that space. So a 2-story building is significantly higher than what you may be accustomed to. So a 2-story building for research and development or light manufacturing may be 30-something feet tall already. And so the height restriction that we currently have would limit those uses to 2 stories, which might not make these types of research development laboratory spaces viable for this area. So that's one example of how we could change the zoning to incentivize the type of development we want in the area. So we certainly will need to talk more about this, but I would start by showing people or guiding people to the existing guidelines for development in the LCD. And that is, I have it pulled up. It's so the current zoning bylaw, not the not the one that we're working through the recodification process. So the zoning bylaw that's posted on the town website, and the LCD explanation starts in section 4.4. So if you all out there want to make a note of that, scroll to 4.4. That will give you the existing guidelines for limited commercial district, and read through that. There's also a dimensional table included with that. And so as you do that, think about, well, what are the changes that I might be comfortable with? Again, remembering that, especially as we talk about height has been controversial in some other areas, but height is relative in terms of how you're seeing it, from where you're seeing it, what your neighbors are, etc. And on certainly near the Mac side of the world, we don't have the pristine hill that you see on the other side for the 40B development. So higher densities and taller buildings would not be so shocking. So think about that. And then we could also, we could, whether it be our zoning change outright or an overlay district, we could certainly have some uses that were allowed by special permit. So not everything has to be by right, and just the way it is in our current zoning bylaws, we get to decide. So if there were some things that you as a community member might think, well, maybe I would accept that, but under what circumstances, I don't know. That's a possibility that would be a special permitting use. So again, I would just encourage people to take a look at the existing guidelines for the LCD and think about what you would be willing to let go of, whether it would be a total change or an overlay district. My big ones are, I would say, as professional planner, I would look at reducing the minimum acreage or the minimum parcel size for development. As I've mentioned, the height limitation is too low. Setbacks are very high. And again, we could, if we did an overlay district, we could build in buffer zones so that you'd have a buffer zone around the area rather than huge setbacks per parcel. And then parking standards, I would just say that this is an issue for every development we look at, is that the parking requirements are going to vary based on the use. And we should look at parking specific to what the use is so that we don't give up a lot of land for parking. Much like we talked about, Gary Gilbert was talking about the density of the proposed assisted living facility. And Anthony was saying, well, you know, the parking requirements, sorry, I may be getting folks mixed up. I think Dana also was talking about parking. But the parking should be as little as possible to service the site. And that would be a big help. So those are a few things that I would suggest we look at if we were to go the route of changing the zoning on our own. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Gary Gilbert, you have your hand up. You have a comment?
Thank you, Ron. Just two things, septic and guidance. I agree with all you said, Gary Russell. I think those are really good points. And I don't think you mentioned the idea of shared parking. I don't know if there's options for that, but minimizing, instead of requiring a minimum amount of parking, it's good to require a maximum amount also. And perhaps there's ways to share it so we take up less land. But on septic, it was my understanding that a 40R process, it would open Anthony up to the possible, some state help to do perhaps a neighborhood septic treatment facility, which sounds to me like a much better environmentally and cost-wise approach. Does that option exist? And is there substantial assistance you could get from the state? And the other question was, Anthony's asked us for guidance. Oh, how do we, maybe Sue could answer this. Where does the guidance come from? How do we, instead of pulling a number out of our heads, how do we tell Anthony, this should have 100 units, this should have 227? I mean, how does one derive a number based on our population or the region? Where does that number come from?
Ron, do you want me to?
Yes, do you have that answer there, Ms. Brown?
Sure, I can address this. So I think there is an option to look at. I don't want to totally answer for Anthony, but I think there is an option for at least looking at an on-site system. There is a possibility, and I do believe that it, given the amount of development that is there, the amount of job production that it would create, and the benefit that it would bring to the town, that the state would certainly entertain the idea of assisting funding for for an on-site system. So I think that is something that is worth looking into. In terms of telling or identifying the number of units, Connie is right that it is that is usually through a study. So you would, but there are professionals that do that and only that for a living, and they assess the needs of the area. So I think while Mr. Symbolius put out a great concept plan and an idea, that the actual number would need to come from the market and from the professionals who do that. And I think that absolutely would be a next step for him. So I think the assisted living number comes from a consultant team that would do some work for Mr. Symboli. And I don't know if he wants to add any more to that.
Mr. Symboli, you have any comments?
I think that, can everyone hear me first? of all?
Yes.
So I think that a consultant, the best consultant's fine to hire, but I also think that two factors have to play into it. Are you servicing the immediate community, or are you looking at, from my own small amount of research, from Brooksby Village to the tip of Gloucester, there's a huge glut. And so you have to look at it and say, are we trying to appeal to just the locals, or are we trying to open it up further, and balance that off against the benefits of the tax revenues? As far as having experts come in and write and do the research, I have no problem with that when there's a little bit. The problem right now is that it's in such the infancy stages that you could spend so much money on architecturals, on different studies without even knowing the direction that you're going in. And so you need a little bit more guidance, but I'd be happy to, start to look at the costs involved and seeing what I would be willing to, how much spend at this early stage versus a little bit later.
Okay.
But I'd rather see, I had more independent units. I without some of the fields I had over, my sense is that the independent units would be most desirable with services to keep people living independent longer. I also was trying to capture a memory care in addition to these in the assisted living facility too, rather than a separate memory care unit building. But I'm, I'm willing to approach this from several different fronts. And I will start getting some more preliminary information now that I've listened to everyone.
Thank you. And I see one last hand raised there, Mary. Did you want to finish? We're against the clock.
Oh, thanks. Just one quick question. There was a number thrown out with the MAC proposal that it would generate 1.5 million in revenue. Is it possible to see a breakdown of that so we know what items or builds are revenue generators and which maybe are less? I think it would be good just to see that breakdown so we could start thinking and planning.
Sue, is that possible to get a breakdown, or is it just a number of?
I don't know if Ginny is still on. I think we weren't.
I am.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, Ginny, can you respond?
I didn't want to commit her to anything. Go ahead, Ginny.
Ginny,
All right,
if you
so
can respond.
These estimates are really estimates. You cannot take what I say, no other assessor in the world ever does estimates like this because they don't want somebody coming down on them saying, well, you told us it was going to be this. Well, so I'm giving you estimates, and at the end of it all, it's all going to be done based on income and expense when this is all built. So it doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing, putting building square footage, bathrooms, kitchens, units, apartment units, things like that. I mean, I'm throwing together a figure, and that's how I came up with that amount. But I can break it down by health and fitness, hotel, based on a very, very out of this world estimate. So if you want to hear it, I'll give you the figures.
Thank you, Jenny. We're up against the clock. Can you be very brief? I have two questions, Mike's iPhone and David Saunders. Mike's, did you want to go first and identify yourself?
Sure, thank you. This is
Can you be brief?
Yep, be very brief. So this is Mike Pratt, and this is a question for Mr. Simboli based off of, I think it was Gary Russell's comments. So Gary Russell mentioned 3 potential zoning changes, setback, height restriction, and I forget minimum building size. So my question is to Mr. Simboli, like, would those kind of zoning changes, help the project? I get that it's conceptual stage, but just as it looks conceptually, are those the kinds of zoning changes that would help that, or that's just tip of the iceberg, or?
Absolutely.
Mr.
I
Simboli,
think that, I think most of them would be needed to build what I proposed, so, but absolutely. And especially once there's guidance too, you can look at, once there's zoning regulations that people say this is what we feel we're comfortable with allowing, then you can look at redesigning to meet them. What I put forth here is a project that I think it maximizes some community benefits. It is a large scale project, but it also serves what I feel is a need in the community. But it is definitely was not based on working around the current, but the current zoning. But those changes are exactly what would be helpful to move forward.
Ron, if I may just interject quickly, I know we're against time, but the other important change would be to allow housing or mixed use in order to make the max proposal work. I was really focusing on the commercial piece of it, but in order to make any sort of project work that would have a housing component, we'd have to allow not only housing, but mixed uses. So we'd have to look at the uses that are allowed in the LCD.
Thank you. Mr. Saunders, you have the last word, I guess.
Thank you very much. David Saunders, we are very new to town. We've only been here about 3 weeks, so please forgive my lack of context here. I so appreciate these meetings. In thinking about the future of the LCD area, is it possible that we'll have something like the MAC development and also the Shingle Hill development both being put into place in that area? Or is it sort of like one or the other, or could it actually end up being both developments?
Well, Ms. Brown, you want to answer that? I think one is up to the voters and one is not.
Yeah, that's it's a great question, and I'm sure it seems like a whole lot. And the answer is we just can't know. The answer on the 40B is that we don't really have control. The answer on the rest of the development in the LCD, we have total control. So although that puts Mr. Simboli at risk, and he, the point is zoning to allow other development will be up to the town and the vote of the town.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Ron, this is Christine. I have a quick question. I'm sorry. So we've talked about these incentive payments, and I know when we originally talked about them, people were asking, would this money ever run out? In light of the pandemic, Sue, have you heard anything? Is this funding indefinite? And the other thing is, I've read that this incentive payments are to offset taxing on infrastructure. So where does that money actually go when we get an incentive payment? Is there a special fund to keep infrastructure around these new developments up to snuff, or does it just go back into the general fund?
I'm not sure that I really can't answer whether it'll be around, but it's around now, but I guess we can never.
No, I understand that.
Sure.
I get that.
Sorry. Yeah, I can't answer that question. The question of where the money can go. Yeah, I know that in the past it has just gone to the town and it didn't have to be earmarked for any particular thing that serviced that that district, but I would be happy to get an answer from DHCD on that.
Great,
And see
thanks.
if anything has changed. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, Sue, do you want to wrap up next steps? And
yes, and
we're
we'll-
running late. If you can go through this quickly, I want to get to the regular planning board meeting.
I can do it very quickly. Can you enlarge it so maybe people can see it and I don't have to talk?
I'll try.
It all. Yay. So, so I just want to say that we're still in the process. What'll happen next is we'll update the design standards and zoning regulations based on the feedback. Then we're going to kick it to the planning board to review and provide recommendations, and then solicit input from all the other boards, committees in town. We'll have another multi-board meeting, and this will be to not only look at the draft recommendations or the recommendations from this study, but also to really ask the question is a 40R the right fit for this, for the limited commercial district and at this time. So we will look to do that after we kind of get a final draft of the standards and zoning, so we know what we're comparing things again. We'll have a multi-board meeting, community forum, and then we'll come up with a recommendation. It may be to be a 40R, it may be to do something completely different. And that's what we will take forward to hopefully a fall town meeting vote. I'm happy to answer questions, or Ron.
Thank
take it
you.
away.
Thank you, Sue. And yeah, this concludes the, and I want to thank all the public for participating. And this concludes the public portion of the presentation. And we're going to move on to the regular planning board meeting after a 2-minute break, so the chair can get his act together on this. So thank you all for coming, and we'll be moving on to the regular meeting, which should be coming shortly. Should be about a half hour's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready to continue. Regular planning board business. First up on the agenda is, which is not on the agenda, but was left off by mistake, but we want to acknowledge, Helene, could you please acknowledge some correspondence received and the date?
Yes, there was a note that was left in our box by Susan Harrington dated January 21st. And there was a letter from Mrs. Carol Cabot dated January 31st.
Thank you. Next item is the 30 University Place curb cut, vote to accept withdrawal without prejudice. Is Mr. I believe Macri online to explain, or wishes to talk at this point?
If he is not, you have a letter from him. I can always read it. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, would you read the letter, please?
Sure.
Helene, thank
Okay,
you.
so dear Manchester by the Sea Planning Board, thank you for your consideration regarding our request for curb cuts on 30 University. We respectfully request to withdraw without prejudice our application for driveway curb cut at 30 University. We are finalizing the hiring of our general contractor and want them engaged in the final design, and will reapply if needed in the future. Respectfully, Garrison Macri and Kathleen Marshall.
Thank you, Helene. Do I hear a motion to accept the withdrawal?
I'll move that we accept the withdrawal for 30 University Lane.
Is there a second?
A second.
Roll call, Mr. Coons,
Yes.
Ms. Delicio,
Yes.
Ms. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. Only,
Yes.
and Mr. Russell.
I recuse myself as a direct abutter. So
And the vote is to withdraw, accept his request to withdraw without prejudice. That's key.
Correct, without prejudice.
Okay. Okay.
And the chair votes yes. So it's 6 and 1 abstention.
Great.
The next 2 requests from Christina. One is to have a speaker at our next meeting or our future meeting to speak on the housing choice legislation. I think Sue is investigating getting a speaker for us, and once we get that, we'll schedule it for one upcoming meeting. Second, Ms. Delicio
Ron?
is it?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It would be great if, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking. Or
Mr. Witten?
No, oh my goodness.
Mr. Bobrowski?
No.
Oh, our moderator?
Yes,
Wilson?
thank you. Yes,
Mr. Wilson?
yes. If he was involved also in explaining how he would like to do this at town meeting. I would like those two intertwined if possible.
Okay,
I
well,
can check with him. He was just kind of really learning
He
about
was
it.
just learning about it, yeah, he
But I'm
wasn't.
sure he's doing his homework well, and we could find out how he wishes to address it.
Perfect, thank you.
Also, Christina, on your desire to have Chuck have 611 explained, I've made some inquiries to Chuck Dam about presenting on 6.11, and he's willing to give us a presentation. Either meeting date in March is good for him, so I will schedule that in either one of our next 2 meetings.
Perfect, thank you, Ron.
The next item is the ADU and curb cut preamble from Chris Only. I was remiss in not distributing the ADU preamble that Chris wrote on the ADUs. But we did distribute the curb cut preamble to everyone. And before it publishes in the Cricket, was wondering if any board members have any comments on that.
Ron, can I just go back to the ADU for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
So the work group is actually working on some revised language, so this is just as well to postpone this till a future date. One of the things we're talking about, for example, is a cap on the number of units that could be created. Some other things that feedback we've gotten that would be incorporated. So I think it's good to postpone that anyway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Only. Anybody have any comments on the curb opening preamble?
So Ron, I guess fall meeting was the first.
Yeah,
I've
Ron,
heard.
Hold on,
Ron.
please address one at a time. I'll start with Christina.
So fall meeting with the 40R was the first time I had heard about that. Are we also thinking that the fall meeting for the recodification?
Yeah, I was going to get to that. That's I was going to get to that in a few minutes.
Well, all I was
well-
thinking is that it might be smarter to stagger these closer to town meeting than this might be too early. I thought we were still gearing up for that. It's just my 2 cents. But
Okay. Any other comments on the preamble?
I thought it was well written. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren or Gary, did you have a comment? I thought I heard
I do, but Lauren, you were first.
Mr. Coons.
Yeah, Ron Lauren. I thought it was written excellently and should go forward with it.
Thank you, Lauren. Mr. Gilbert,
Um,
you're on.
I have a couple comments sort of written. Is it possible just to send, is it possible to send this to Chris that he could consider and maybe we discuss it at the next meeting, or do we need to vote on it this meeting?
We don't need to vote on it this meeting. If there are comments, why don't you send the comments to the site, put them in the site so everyone can look at them.
Okay, I could read them now, but that would take a discussion and chew up time. So I'm quite happy just to send them in to the site.
Yeah, why don't you do that and then people can look at them, the whole board.
Okay, Chris only seems to agree. Is there a way to get, when we go to that document share place on the internet, all I was able to get were PDFs, and it's very hard to leave comments on a PDF. Is it possible to get Word documents in there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know why they would be, I don't know why they would just be PDFs. Do they come up as, it may be that they're PDFs because only the administrator has editing. So
That shouldn't be the.
yes,
That's a
that-
problem.
No, that's the way it's supposed to be. So that.
I found one thing you can do, Gary, is copy the text off the SharePoint and then paste it into a Word document. And then you have it's a Word document at that
That's
point.
cheating. Okay, brilliant idea.
Good idea.
Okay, I'll send these not to Chris, but to that site. Thanks.
Okay.
So,
Any other comments?
Yeah, one
Christina?
comment on that. The agenda doesn't say agenda in the name, so could we get a little more detailed with the descriptions, please?
I don't understand. Could you just repeat that?
Our agenda does not have the word agenda in the title, so I would just like a little more clarity
Okay.
in the titles.
Understood.
Okay,
Thank you.
I have, Helene, can I say something?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, so it's not very big, but underneath where it says Zoom meeting and then all the description, there's a little bold agenda topic, then presentation, and then other planning board business. So you might have to look a little harder, but.
Colleen, I'm just talking about in the SharePoint site, there's.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So when you're looking at these, I can't tell which one was the agenda, that's all.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Okay, yeah, I thought you meant on the actual agenda.
No. Thank you, Helene.
Apologies, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe try and get a like correspondence and then something. I mean, that one, I had trouble finding that one. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, so on the minutes, I think everyone was busy. We got no comments on the minutes, so I'd like to table them till next meeting. Before
Ron,
we-
this is Mary. Can I just
Yes, ma'am.
ask for clarification? It says on the agenda, special meeting February 2nd, but the meeting we have in our packet is February 8th.
Yes.
So you're referring to February 8th, correct?
That's correct. February 8th, there were no comments back, so I don't think anyone's really looked at them yet. So take a look. We'll talk about them next meeting. This special meeting, Helene, this must be a cut and paste from,
I don't know, I didn't, I have to ask, I don't know. I didn't do it.
okay, I did it. I think I did this cut and paste sloppy.
Ron, I have comments, but I can just email them to Helene if that's easier.
Yep. Or put them on the, yeah, we'll put them on the site.
Put them up. Okay.
Subcommittee and liaison updates. I have nothing from the CPC. Anyone have anything related to the planning board from their liaisons? Okay, just on this next topic, I received a call from Eli last week on meeting being moved to June 21st. I don't know if it's official yet, but longest day of the year. That's where they're going to have it. And they are going to limit the town meeting to essential items, basically the budget and things of that nature. So with that in mind, we're moving the recodification at the earliest to a possible fall town meeting. So just wanted to make people aware of that. There's talking to Alan Wilson, there's a possibility that the fall town meeting will be in the new Memorial School in a room that seats, I think, over 400 people. And it will have state-of-the-art media available to us. So I think it would be to our advantage to put our prospective law changes and renumbering up on the screen so everyone can see it and understand it. And this kind of gives us time to prepare stuff like that. So it may be a blessing in disguise. And besides, I don't think we were really prepared to rush into this in this timeframe, even in June. And there is no guarantee that they will have an indoor town meeting in the fall. The way see how this COVID thing shakes out. So in the next, I've been polling the board on the next meeting with Bobrowski to finish up on the recodifications, sections 9 through 12. We are targeting March 16th. Everybody's felt that date was best for everyone. So we're going to, Mark's available, hopefully still, and we're going to schedule for that date. Schedule of upcoming planning boards meeting, March 8th, March 22nd. How's the SharePoint site? Next item, the SharePoint site status. I think everyone's in except Mr. Coons. We're working on that. We're still mailing him stuff the old fashioned way. But just any comments on how that's working out for people and finding it a better system, or any comments or criticisms or concerns?
I think
it's
good.
great. I just would like consistency when we label them. That was all. That was my only comment. Thank you.
We will work on that.
I'd like to, I like Lauren to be, have all the same facilities we have. Lauren, do you need help? I mean, you want to bring your laptop by my house or something, or you can help you? Or?
Sue, I think it's with Sandra.
I'm just trying to
Networks.
get connected in somehow.
Oh, hi, Mary Ann. I'll take care of it. It's under control. Thank you.
Mary Ann, did someone reach out to you? Did Sonia get you, or?
I talked to Sonia today.
got-
There's still a problem on their end. So the problem's not with Lauren.
That's very brave of you to say. Very good of you to say. Ron?
Okay, everyone, yeah.
One thing, I just want to clarify, the February 2nd special meeting was the zoning recodification minutes.
Okay, and
If anyone-
were they sent out and
Yes,
and were they approved, or they still need to be
no,
reviewed?
they were pending approval. That's why they're on there.
So they were in our, they weren't in our folder. Were they in last month's folder or last meeting's folder? I mean,
I would have to check them. We can do it for
There
next
was-
time, but
there
so
was
we'll
just
put it-
one set of minutes.
Thanks. All right, so we'll do that for next meeting then.
Okay, so we'll do both those minutes. By the way, we're way ahead of any other board in minutes approval, so congratulations to all of you. We're in first place. So, okay, lots of interesting comments from the public. Thank you, Sue, on a presentation, and Gary Russell for helping out and getting things out to the public.
Ron, this is Mary. Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, ma'am.
So in the next steps section, is the planning board now going to be involved going forward with the 40R? With those
Ms.
timeline
Yes.
topics?
Yes, Ms. Brown, please, the
So,
steps going forward.
yeah, so the planning board having always been involved, I just want to clarify that the planning board has always been involved. And I will, yeah, so the next step was to put both of the zoning regulations and the design standards in front of the planning board. And I would hope that you would have a meeting with a fairly long time dedicated to going over that, providing some input on both of those. And then we'll at this simultaneously or at this, or just after, we could also solicit from all of the other boards and committees. So Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the Zoning Board of Appeals, et cetera, et cetera. So once we get everyone's comments, and I feel like I have a good idea of which way they're leaning, then I think we would all meet as a board and figure out what the next step is.
So we would have that meeting and then do the comments and then meet again?
I would, yes, I would say that. So I
Okay,
would,
and then how are we getting public input? Just from another public forum or?
yes, so they will all of these are public meetings, and if you or other boards want to take public comments while they're addressing them in their public meetings, they can be gathered that way. And then, but we'll also have at the multi-board and committee forum and public meeting, at that time, we'd be definitely taking public comments.
So some of the points that Gary Russell was making with other options, will we be presenting those other options as well?
I think I think when we get, yes, so I think that's the decision that needs to be made. I think you get to a final place where you say, this is the best that we could make of the 40R. And then once you have that best effort, then you look at it and say, does it work? Because even the best effort may not work because of everything else that's going on. Or just because it isn't intended to. So I would say that the decision that would be made is, does the 40R work? And if it does not, are there other options that we would want to put forth before town meeting vote? Because then we will just need to do some work and decide what those other options are. So I think that they're all in there.
And the town assessor wasn't able to answer the question of the 1.5 million. So hopefully between now and the next meeting, we could get that breakdown so that we have revenue numbers to work with.
Yeah, she's able to answer the question. What she was hedging for and what she was saying is that because it's not how the assessment, the tax revenue would be identified or projected in real world. Basically, she's just basing it on her understanding of what it will cost to produce them. So with the assessed value, I mean, I think she still wants to do a little more work on it, but she does have the numbers broken out by all of it. But she said we put it in different buckets, if you will, so she could break it out by residential, by facility, by healthcare, by the hotel, et cetera. So I can get those numbers, but she just wants to be very clear that this is not what she thinks that they will actually produce, because the real numbers will be produced based on income and expense, and we just don't have any idea. We just have not done that work, and it would be unrealistic to ask her to do that level of work at this point. So this is just a very high level look at revenue production. Does that make sense?
Are you asking me? Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think that then that'll fall nicely into that request that we have into FinCom for the LCD feasibility financial feasibility study so that that can expand upon any uses. So fair
Well,
enough.
I don't think that, I think that they're gonna have the same thing. They can only base it on that type of information. So I'm sure it would be no different than her projection, in fact. So we're kind of stuck with our best estimate is what I think she was trying to tell us. And they shouldn't be considered hard and fast numbers.
Okay,
And
thanks.
Mr. Fetterspiel's on there if he wants to add anything to my rambling.
Greg, any comments on,
Yeah, no, the bottom line is that there are always going to be guesstimations at this point because you don't really know until something is actually built and is operating and producing their income stream. So you're always going to be guessing as to what potential tax revenues are a particular property are going to generate.
okay, two other members have their hands raised. Mr. Gilbert?
I'm obviously not an expert on taxes, but it sure seems to me that the revenues would be considerably higher than that initial projection. And I think it might be worthwhile, maybe, to talk to neighboring towns where they have a similar buildings of similar size and talk to their assessors, like I did about an office building in Beverly. My hunch is we'd get a lot more revenue. But my question was, if we're going to talk about the 40R anymore, I'd like to see a more complete list of pros and cons. There's a number of things that are alluded to that you would get preferential treatment for certain kinds of grants. Is there any way to sketch out a list of the kinds of grants that we or the home property owner might likely seek? And are we talking about a small amount of money, or like when I mentioned the septic system, is that a medium, a small, or large amount of funding that might be obtained? Or what's the full spectrum of pros and cons is what I'm trying to get at. Maybe Gary has more of a handle on it, but it's hard to evaluate supporting this when we keep going back to the mandated 51% of housing. People there's a lot of nuances to it.
Okay, thank you. Gary, any comment?
For me, I think that's a good idea. I think that's the type of discussion that we need at whenever you put that on your agenda. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there is information on the website about what a 40R, some of the benefits of a 40R in terms of other grants. It elevates your standing for grants, for example, septics. So that was in, I've got some information on that. It can be found on the 40R website, but I'm happy to send that out.
Okay. Christina, is your hand up, or is it a refreshed hand again, or a?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So
Yes.
there was a next step. Where exactly are we in the project? Are we at phase 2, task 5? The regulations that you were referring to in the first draft, I looked for them quickly and I couldn't find them. So do we have a draft? Is it specific to this project, or is it just generic boilerplate?
So it may have been that the one that was sent was more of the boilerplate. And let me find out. I couldn't tell you offhand what phase task we're at, but we'll be adjusting it because we're going to save some of the funding till we find out if now we know we're going to have a later town meeting. We were due to finish up before then, but now we're going to adjust things because we won't be presenting at town meeting. Part of their funding was to support a town meeting presentation. So we may be flipping some funding to either change what we're looking at or to provide some different assistance, but at the very least to change it into a different fiscal year. So I can't answer your question because I don't have the contract in front of me about what task we're at, but I'm happy to provide it. We're working on the regulations, which was phase 2. I just don't know what task it is.
So are you still having working group calls? Are those still happening?
I've only had working group emails. And I don't know, I know I was copied on from some of the working group members when they forwarded those emails along to their boards. I don't know if it happens to everyone, from all of them.
So I mean, this third working group was supposed to be an overview of the draft zoning language. So I'm just, how is this
That has not,
progressing?
that
How is-
that has not happened. There's not been a draft of the regulations.
Okay, I'm just, because I was just confused what you were talking about then earlier tonight. You were talking about height that was specific to this region. Right?
Yes.
No?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so we do have draft regulations, but we haven't had a call and we don't have them. Is that true?
I have seen the draft regulations, so I may have not have passed them along.
Okay,
So I'm happy to do that.
great.
I'll put them on the share site.
Okay, well, lots of information tonight, and I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Okay? All those in favor?
I
Yes.
Okay, by acclamation, I say we're adjourned. See you in March.
Thanks, Ron.
Right.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ron.
Bye. Thank you all.
Ron.